All right. The big question that is at the top of everyone's mind, Dan, is Poch's position in doubt? All right, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. I'm your host, Brandon, joined by my hosts, Nick and Dan. And gentlemen, post-match Wolves review coming at you. Oof, this is going to be a fun one, Nick.
It will not be fun, but it will be interesting, I think, for people. We were kind of gabbing before the show about, the right approach to this. And, I think we've had a really good chat about it. And luckily, a lot of thoughtful questions have come in, Dan, as you've kind of aggregated everything together. So what are the people going to hear from us on today?
Well, there's a lot of questions about the manager, a lot of questions about the owners, a lot of questions about the ownership structure and sporting directors, the players. Basically, it's inquest season, and no one is outside of the crosshairs of the Chelsea community in this moment. So lots of questions to get into, and we will try to take as good a tone as we can throughout it. But boy, oh boy, this was not the extra bit of added frustration I needed on a moving weekend, which actually went really smooth outside of that.
That's right. Dan, just, trucking across the country, trying to enjoy your move into New York City. And none of that is happening, right? As we stand right here, none of it is going to be allowed to happen. So don't worry. We'll try to bring some normalcy back to your life with the pod, because what else do you have to do in a new city besides explore, right?
Very fair. Very fair. I mean, we did have questions, though, just off the top. Sandberget asking, is it okay to cheat on my diet after watching that? Which I did give an affirmative. I think absolutely a cheat meal after that. Totally, totally cool. And Alberto asking, what's your drink of choice to put this crap behind you? Not beer. This needs something much stronger. So I feel like we have to send this one to Nick for a little bit of an opinion on what is the perfect Wolves 4, Chelsea 2 result beverage.
Alberto, your failures led you back to me, and now we're here. Look, I would go with something barrel proof today, something a little spicy, maybe a little rye action. I think you want to feel the hurt on this one. I think you want to feel it go down, and then maybe just level out right after that. Maybe a quick nap.
I was thinking that you definitely want something with bite, because you got to feel what happened today. And with that being said, look, for a lot of you that have been listening to us for a while, you know where we stand on these things. It is bad right now, right? Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. Like, are we upset? Massively. The difference, though, we have to take into account as podcasters and content creators is we can't just go off the deep end every episode, especially when it's a tough run. We have to try to come up with something different. So the other thing is, if you just burn a player and they come back the next week and have a great one, that's also tough. Twitter, they do it all day long. It's different here. So while you may want us to go burn the bridges and tear it all down, it just can't happen week after week after week. There'll be nothing left. So again, we're going to try to pull out some things and dive into this in different ways, because also, if you want that, that's there. Go ahead. Go to your favorite YouTuber. Go to your favorite Twitter personality. It's already there, Nick. So again, we're just going to try to bring something different to the conversation that isn't happening and still allows us to have a connection with the club at the end of it.
You wouldn't want to be the boys who cried wolves, would you? Oh, no, that's terrible. Look, here's also what we're not going to do. I think you're probably going to hear a lot of different takes today. I think, you're going to hear a lot of different questions. We're not going to make up stuff about what's going on at the club. We're not going to make up sources. We're not going to make up information. We're not going to make up who's coming, who's going. We have journalists that we trust to report on the information at the club. You're going to hear from them over the next couple of weeks, no doubt about it. We're going to have them on for specials. We're not reporters. We are certainly just commentators. We think we're pretty thoughtful commentators. But here's what we're not going to do, is just make some shit up to suit a narrative that we have for ourselves. And I know the OGs all know that. I know the OGs have been around through 18 different manager sackings and player turnovers and all that sort of stuff. But Saw a lot of that on Twitter today. That ain't us. You know that.
Yeah, that's also something that's hard to come back from if that's
Sure is.
not turns out not to
is.
be right. So look, and Nick, you talk about the 18 different sackings and things like that. Look, and a lot of people were around beyond just last season as well. I mean, let's widen this out. It was about 18 managers sacked last season, it felt like, but we're in a bit of a familiar place, Dan. Let's set the stage though. Let's get the people's perspective here with the 3-word match review. It's essentially in case you missed it. What are the people saying?
We had the 5 takes on the 5 stripes with Argyle, ? No guile. Pablo P with Potch's Rotten Tomato. Good tie in between those two.
That's pretty good.
Jen, the Wonderkin with Need a Drink. Jay up the Chelsea with Wait for Puberty. You had Jacksonville Blues with what I'm just going to affectionately call the Ben Affleck gif, where he's just staring into the darkness. Grizz, the new normal, which is very unfortunate. Damien with the seriously unfortunate events, little lemony snicket one there. And then Carefree Tosser, longtime listener, deflecting the blame.
That's good.
Yeah. That's going to take the cake, I have to say.
Yeah.
Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I put on Twitter earlier that this was the turning point, and the best turning point that I could think of was milk. So instead of cream, we're spoiled milk now. It's cream spoiled milk is my 3-word match review.
Dan, what about you?
A little Duran for you. Hungry? Those Wolves. They came to play. We didn't.
Not wrong. I said, what's gonna give? Or honestly, you could put who's gonna give, because at this point, something's gonna break. There's no doubt about it. We've been down this road before, so I am just on pins and needles waiting to see where we go from here. But we want to shout out our amazing community. Nick, before we get into everything, the 5-star reviews are massive.
Yeah, look, especially for any new folks who are in the Men in Blazers media atmosphere who are coming over to our show after the announcement last week. First of all, thank you for all the love last Thursday and Friday. That was really fucking cool. It was a great day, a couple of days for us. Hit us with the old 5-star review. Just go on there. The water's warm. It's great. Spotify and Apple Podcasts, just double up while you're doing that. Of course, subscribe on YouTube. We're posting unique content there now that isn't just kind of the pod lifted and shifted. We're doing unique content. Of course, you can join us on Discord. That is a paid option, but there are a lot of really animated and frustrated and thoughtful folks in that Discord right now, and you could probably understand why. And then finally, we have a special episode, or edition, I should say, of the London is Blue Dispatch. And the Dispatch is going to be written by one Daniel Dormer today. I think for Wednesday's release, Dan's going to dust off the old writing fingers and see what he can conjure up. And God only knows what's going to happen. So I would subscribe to that for free.
Clickety clack.
All right. Well, let's take a look here. It was the Wolves in the Premier League this past Sunday, the 4th of February at Stamford Bridge. In case you missed it, lucky you. Chelsea 2, Wolves 4. Rundown of the goals, 19th minute, Cole Palmer. And then, essentially Mateus Cunha got his hat trick, 22nd minute, 63rd, 82nd. Disasi with the own goal in the 43rd. Thiago Silva pulling one back late in the 86th. So not the day you want to see by any means. Let's go ahead, Dan, and run us through the lineup, right? We had some changes. All right.
We didn't.
But I think everybody got excited early that we had 2 fullbacks. How'd that work out?
Not great, Bob. We had Petrovic between the sticks, Malagusto, Axel Disasi, Thiago Silva, and Ben Chilwell as your back 4. It was Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, and Cole Gallagher as your midfield trio, and then Raheem Sterling.
Connor Gallagher, not Cole.
Connor Gallagher, yes. And then Cole Palmer, Christopher Nkunku, and Raheem Sterling as your attack. It was Nico Jackson, Carney Chukwuemeka, Mikhailo Mudryk, Alfie Gilchrist, and Benoit Badiashile all making appearances off the bench. It was the 63rd, 72nd, and 81st minutes, respectively, for those individuals. And look, we put 2 goalkeepers on the bench because why not? Why not put Washington on the bench? Who knows? We can't forget about him with Bettinelli and Bergstrom, and then Cesar Casadei and Nani Madueke round out the unused subs in this match.
All right. Well, some of the top line stats to refresh your memory. Chelsea with 1.74 XG, Wolves with 2. We had 64% of possession. We had 15 shots, 6 on target. Wolves with 14 shots, 7 on target. We had 10 corner kicks to their 1. Sure wish we could do something with set pieces. 3 offsides, Nico Jackson right away. Appreciated that. Good reminder. And then from there, big chances. We had 6. We had 6 big chances and we missed 5. Insane. Wolves had 3, only missed 1. Look, I made a dumb joke in a previous episode. Sam, CFC Central, I apologize.
Yeah, you really fucked it up.
I talked about the fact that our big chances are conversions turn around because that's all he talked about in the first half of the season. He left me on red, guys. And I understand why.
I think he might have blocked you, just FYI.
You're not wrong. 5 out of 6 missed. Insane. The one random stat from Matt Optajoe's 4. Chelsea have conceded 4 more goals in consecutively games for a second time under Mauricio Pochettino. Something that hadn't happened since December 1989 prior to his arrival. Headache.
Look, can I just quickly about the big chances? If you think about the progress or not questions that we're going to get into in the Premier League this year, big chances created. And I think this is before this weekend is when these stats were aggregated. Newcastle United, 59 big chances. Liverpool, 57. Aston Villa, 52. Manchester City, 52. Number 5, Chelsea on 50 big chances created. And dear God, I think we've missed nearly all of them. So it's just something to think about as you're processing your anger and or frustration, that we've created a ton of them and just haven't finished any of them.
It's so tough and bad. I will look into that and see if we can figure out how many big chances have actually been converted. No NPET shitouts moment of the match because there's no fight. There's no shit housing. We're just taking it right now. And it is probably the most frustrating thing for the supporters is that we are just taking these beatdowns without anything to get back. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and take our first ad break. But when we get back, more about the big question on top of everybody's mind. Thank you to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, the big question that is at the top of everyone's mind, Dan, is Poch's position in doubt?
It is a fair question to ask when the team is heading into 11th position in the Premier League with a overwhelming majority of the matches played, no European competition locked down, little progress, if any, on any of the individual players despite underlying results in terms of things like XG improving. And Chelsea have the 3rd highest XG ahead of Man City right now in the Premier League. So there's crazy stats that bear out that this should not be going as badly as it is, but it is. I think also the fair thing, Nick, and I know you want to self-promote your own tweet here, is that we should maybe just preface before we get into asking the Poch question, no one was good enough today. And that goes down to the players, that goes to the managers, it goes to players that we've praised a lot earlier in the season, like Conor Gallagher, who was stepping up. It was players like Thiago Silva, who had Bell Silva tweeting things as well, which did not help in this scenario at all. players who are new to the team, like Moises Caicedo, who had a brilliant assist initially and then had some really unfortunate errors that he committed throughout the game. Like, no one was good enough. That is Pochettino. It is the players. The only people who are good enough are the supporters. The ones who made it all the way to the end, hats off to you. That is a commitment unlike anyone else.
Yeah, I think where I want to start this conversation is, I think, utter frustration. Like we were talking a couple weeks ago. Brandon and I were on the previous show that we did whilst you were moving across the country, Dan, and we asked the question: are Chelsea better than they were a year ago? And boy, was that a stupid question that we should have saved for the end of the year. Because it turns out we're the exact same. We're going to go through some of the stats and all that sort of stuff later. But, you look at it within the context of this Premier League, and we could have been 7th a couple weeks ago if we would have handled our business. You could argue it's the weakest top 10 in recent Premier League memory that we're seeing right now. We simply cannot climb the ladder at all. The highest we got was 8th for like a day, and then we got leapfrogged again. I don't know what the solution is, right? I think we're going to talk about a few options, but I'm not here to profess that I know every in and out or what's going to happen necessarily. But I'm guessing that the solution is likely more complicated and expensive than anyone on Twitter tweeting their Poch out hashtags is willing to admit. And that is the frustrating part, Brandon, is that we are in a situation yet again, kind of like we were last year, where we don't have an easy way out. There is no easy button to push here. And I think that's why the well of frustration that we're going to see from some of these questions later on in the script is there, because there is no easy button to say, oh, we'll just replace the manager and we'll go win the Champions League again.
There's no doubt about that, because if we could, we would. Look, it is complicated, right? I think the biggest problem that these owners are always going to have to face, right, is the success of the previous regime. No two ways about it. Chelsea fans have come to expect success on the pitch. And when it doesn't come in a year, fine. But now it's not looking like it's coming for a second year. And a lot of the problems that we felt like we saw last year still aren't being solved. Now we have like disconnecting between the fans and the club. Now we have the turmoil, and when the owners are trying to do new things or trying to be creative or innovate, it doesn't come off, because what happens on the pitch isn't living up to the standards and the expectations. What I think is a dangerous game, and I'll spin this back to you, Dan, are people saying that they know people and they talk to people and that the dressing room has fallen apart. The players have lost trust in the manager. Again, I don't think people on Twitter that are not journalists, right, that don't do this for a full-time job or are not essentially publicly close with these players, really, that is a dangerous game to play and for us as fans and supporters to latch onto. And we've seen it happen time and time again. That's just my little PSA. Everyone do what you want. Tread lightly. Be careful.
Well, there's always been with Chelsea this conversation around player power versus the manager, and previous ownership was very much at times quick to try to solve for the players having an issue, because typically the players could be reconfigured in such a way that you could go out and get a result. You could fire someone, and then within another 12 to 18 months, you had a trophy, and it was great, and you could celebrate it. And that was aligned with Chelsea's model for success. And that is not the trajectory that we are on right now, when we have now gone through Thomas Tuchel, Graham Potter, Frank Lampard, Mauricio Pochettino, and we are no closer to the next point.
Whoa, Bruno. Hey.
Sorry. Well, one game, Bruno. we did forget about Bruno. Look, ultimately, we are not closer to a European spot. We are not closer to. I mean, we are heading into a cup final, but that is in a very precarious situation. And I think, we had questions from Edric, Blue Boy, and AJ just asking someone around like, are we in the end game with Poch? Is Poch getting sacked? Why are we calling for his head? Like, because we've tried this thing before, we fire the manager and it doesn't necessarily fix the issue. I think the better question is, are we comfortable with Pochettino coaching until the end of the season, and like reasons for and reasons against, right? Nick, I think I am probably closer to the idea that Pochettino coaching in a cup final right now is almost admitting to the fact that we are going to lose. I think it is like very close to being a white flag territory. But if I were going to go for reasons for, I don't know who you bring in right now, whether that's to the end of the season or whether that is a replacement. And I think that is the biggest reason why I struggle with the immediate firing, because I don't know who you put in. There's a lot of calls for JT, who has not led a team in the Premier League. That feels, again, people looking at it from the badge perspective and saying, well, he knows Chelsea, so that's going to carry over. That doesn't necessarily feel like the right solution. We don't want another round of Frank Lampard. People are pointing to Jose and the fact that he's no longer Roma, but that potentially could be one that people are looking at as well. It just doesn't feel like there's a good tailor-made option to drop in there, and that's why I don't think you could go after a firing, even though it doesn't feel like there's going to be any progress.
Well, I mean, be honest. I don't know if the manager really matters to the cup final at all. Like, I think we just saw the difference in class between the two teams 4 days ago. If we play at our best and they play at their worst, we got a shot. If that doesn't happen, it's probably not going to go the way that we want it to. And I doubt it's because of the manager. I think that they are just playing at a very high level right now. Their players are players that have been together for large parts of their careers together. Again, I don't think we're going to win that game anyway, but I don't know if the manager is going to be the thing that makes or breaks it. And that's the difficult part, is like, if we were always judging the season based on that trophy, and now we are facing, a team, despite their loss to Arsenal today, which was kind of weird and fluky, team that is just playing at a much higher level than we are, that's 30 some points ahead of us in the table or nearly there, then, I'm not sure. I think the question that I would ask myself, Brandon, is, do we think, if you think back to the beginning of the season, improving these players, getting a tune out of this group of players that the club and sporting directors and the owners have invested in, do we think that Poch will get any more juice out of that lemon, if you will, out of the, can he get a tune out of these guys? Can he make them better players if he gets another 3 months? Or is that simply not going to happen? That's my new litmus test for this. If we think he can, and we're kind of resigned to where we're going to end up this season, which I think, there are varying levels of that, then there's no sense in sacking him right now. If we think that he has made them worse, and there are cases for that, then I see a case.
I think that's probably the crux of it, because I can't give you a clear answer, right? It's up and down. It's wild. Some players have, I guess, like Cole Palmer has absolutely shined in this system with Pochettino. But then you have other players that have not always found a way to shine. And even like Conor Gallagher has regressed a bit. And he was like our shining star early in the season. What is going on with the defense? It's almost like, I don't know. Maybe we don't have enough center backs. Maybe that actually was the problem. And Caicedo, right? Like, you get 1 step forward, 2 steps back constantly, and it's always someone different. So I think about it as a leader and a manager, you're trying to get everybody pointed in the same direction, right? And going the same direction. That's not happening right now because there's no consistency. Like, I think all the supporters and fans, we were ready for a project, right? Because you were going to build, but there's going to be progress at times. We were going to perfect something, then move on to the next thing, and we haven't done it. But for at least our defense was one of our better places. 8 goals in 2 games. Granted, one was Liverpool, should not have conceded 4, and then we concede 4 to Wolves. That is not good enough. So I don't know. Is he getting people better? It is really, really hard to see that, I think, directly this season. I don't know. I don't know. Do either of you feel strongly that there are the upsides? I mean, I don't think it can go backwards. The biggest problem to me, Dan, I think, is that players will get bored. If players feel like things are going so bad, they will just stop trying and they'll get bored with it. That's the real concern to me.
Well, if there's not accountability from the manager to the players, and the manager is not accountable to the sporting directors, and sporting directors are not accountable to the board, like, we have heard the pitch that Chelsea were a not well-run organization as new ownership came in. And we are now in the point where, if we faced a point deduction, we would be in a very bad spot right now. Like, we are not good enough on the pitch. We're not good enough off the pitch. If the Jordan brand needs European competition next season to guarantee a partnership, it's more likely Spurs right now would get that deal if it goes to an existing Nike club in London than Chelsea would. I mean, Chelsea have very limited opportunity to potentially get into the Conference League, not even Europa League, the Conference League. So if we're saying where the club hierarchy is in this situation, I mean, I don't know. I've seen, I think we're the three of us are all kind of professionals who work in some type of corporate environment. Like, you have your annual review period, which typically happens like after the end of the majority of the major projects get completed at the end of the year. Typically, this is something that would wait till the end of the season. But if you have some core deliverables that if you don't hit and you don't achieve could have catastrophic implications to this club, then you might need to do the thing that is not the easy thing to do. Because when you fire a manager, you're not just firing the manager, you're firing their infrastructure of individuals around them. You are taking on additional expense when you do that because you're paying out the terms of their contract. Like, this is not necessarily a cheap thing to do, but it may be the right thing to do. And it may not just be the manager, it may also be the sporting directors, right? Like, there's a opportunity to look at who we recruited, how we still don't have someone who can convert all of the amazing chances that we're creating. Like, that has not changed. Like, we have continued to create good chances for the entirety of the season. We just don't score them. And we have a bunch of U23 players that we recruited in favor of the methodology that we used. And whether that was the sporting directors, the ownership, or both, like, that failed. That failed in playing in the Premier League. We might be a great PL2 side. We are not a great Premier League side.
So I think one way we can sparse this, Nick, is on the Chelsea subreddit, Brock Stinky put in a table, created a very clear chart of stats between Potter and Pochettino. And like, there's some good things for Poch and there are some not so good things about Poch, right? And then we've got their players used sort of by minutes, which I think is also super helpful. Like, who did these managers rely on? And right now they're both at 31 matches played. So feel free to cherry pick a couple of things that stood out to you, and we can at least look at this because we all agree it was terrible under Potter. So where are we under Poch at the same place?
Yeah, I mean, so they split this up between overall Premier League and Cups, right? Because I think you kind of have to do it that way. Overall, Pochettino has 3 more wins than Potter, 15-12. Potter has more draws than Pochettino. They both have the same amount of losses. We have scored way more goals under Pochettino, 54 to Potter's 33. We have conceded way more goals under Pochettino than Potter, 48-31. So it's basically like the same goal
Difference.
diff, essentially. We have less clean sheets underneath Pochettino, and the best win streak that we have for Potter, which was, I think, kind of masked, was at the beginning of his tenure, which was 5 games. Pochettino's only won 3 games in a row twice. So that is what it is. But you look at the Premier League, and Pochettino only has 3 more points, right? We're actually sub 1 in goal differential at this point, where we were 0 underneath Potter. We have more losses in the Premier League under Pochettino than we do Potter. We have less draws, and we just have 2 more wins. The cups are kind of fluky, so I don't even know if we want to go into that. But you think about the stats, like, again, I apologize to everyone who listened to the preview that Brandon and I did, where we said, are we better? Stats are clearly better. They're actually not now. I mean, a couple of good, thumping losses will bring you back down to earth for sure. But maybe, Dan, you look at the players here and try and like parse out who the consistent performers are for both.
Well, I mean, it's Silva, Cucurella, Sterling, Chilwell, Gallagher, James, Enzo, Badiashile, Mudryk, Boria, Chukwuemeka, Madueke, and Humphreys. It's just like interesting that those are the players who have shared responsibility across Potter's reign and Pochettino's reign. But when you look at where the concentration is, like Gallagher's, middle of that grouping, whereas he is the second most in terms of like player minutes used under Pochettino, behind Axel Disasi, Thiago Silva, Sterling, and Caicedo, rounding out that grouping. It's just, when you look at the attackers, the fact that, Havertz was the leading attacker in terms of overall minutes under Graham Potter, and it's Sterling underneath Pochettino. Like, none of these are necessarily like the league leading scorer, right? Nico Jackson, the league leading scorer, he's down in the 8th, 9th individual with the most minutes under Pochettino. You look at it was Jorginho under Potter was in like the very, very middle, right? So, like, I guess good that we have one player that's been able to eclipse Jorginho's amazing tally of goals last season, but just very, very much shows that there's still an issue with attacking players, regardless of if you can tie together a midfield or you can round out your defense.
Look, there's a lot similar, right? But there's a lot has changed as well. But look, we're not immune to that in the Premier League. Gary O'Neill, right? Taking this Wolves team, doing wonders with it. He has no budget, had no preseason. So I'm just saying, other teams are doing it with less. But we're going to take our last ad break when we get back. We're going to continue to parse some things around this team and see if there's a path back. So again, thank you to sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right. Just hitting it out of the ad break, Nick. You want to talk, I think, about the back line, right? Obviously, we've had a ton of changes. A lot of injuries back there. Back four has been pretty much the consistency all season, I would say. I think it's so he can have 2 holding kind of midfielders in front of them. But what did you want to talk about on the defense?
Well, we're just kind of thinking out loud here, right? Again, there are a lot of people who are Twitter tacticos, and then there are real licensed coaches who do this for a fucking living. So we are just kind of throwing out some thoughts. And one of my thoughts for the last month has been going to back 3, playing wing backs. Chilwell had a disaster at left back today. Him and Silva on that side were terrible. And I can't say much better for the other side. Gusso and Disasi were terrible. I think that the strain on the fullbacks has been a consistent problem all year. I don't think we have the fullbacks to play the exact way that Pochettino wants his fullbacks to play. I think that when the fullbacks get forward and Caicedo plus 2 center backs are left to do a lot of the cleaning up, that it leaves us wide open down the flanks. And you can start and stop a lot of problems by just going to a back three with wingbacks, making your life a little bit easier on your wingbacks to get up and down, provide serious width, give Thiago Silva the cover that he needs on both sides with Disasi and maybe Badiashile or Colwell. And I think it would make Caicedo's job a lot more interesting and probably better from a ball progression standpoint, linking up with Enzo, linking up with the front three. Look, what I think you lose is that number 10 role if you do move that way. So there are pluses and minuses to every formation, the way that you set it up. We have largely played an amoeba formation this year where things are slanted to one side of the field, and that's where we try and do a lot of overloads and stuff like that. So I actually don't really know if that will matter that much. But I think the natural width that you get from the wingbacks, we've seen it be successful for us before in multiple different iterations, whether it was Conte's iteration or Tuchel's iteration. With the personnel that we have, what I would be looking for from Poch is to say, this shit is not good enough. We are struggling all over the pitch. The first thing we got to do is shore up the back. We got to stop leaking stupid goals. And that would be my solution to doing that. And then, look, if you're an attacker, and we got a lot of them, the best three play every single week. Period. End of story. If you're an attacker that's not one of the best three, improve. That's the only thing I got. I think there was a call on the NBC post-game show from Robbie Earl to say, like, he has to get really ruthless now. I think he doesn't have to be ruthless in tone, but I think he has to be ruthless in selection. I think there have been performances that just simply don't make the cut. So if we're just thinking about ways to strengthen, those are a couple of thoughts.
So I apologize. I grimaced, not at you. At the
No, you just do that normally.
At the comment of you have to get ruthless. These aren't 26, 27, 28, 32-year-old players. They're 20. Like, they're missing the context here. What is Poch? Last time Jose Mourinho ripped up a bunch of young players, Kevin De Bruyne and Mohamed Salah, and shipped them out, he got slated for it. So you can't have your cake and eat it both ways. Like, there is a high level of development that is required of this manager. Whether or not Poch, he had to have known it coming into it, Dan. But I get frustrated when, like, that's the thing is, one, we've had Tim Howard, like, he missed the comment, I think, in pre-match of like, oh, Poch is rotating a lot. Yeah, because of the injuries, right? Like, a lot of the rotation is forced on him. But then you've got young players. If you were to just yank hard, which he has a couple people, Mudrik's come off early, right? He has done that to players. Like, there are long-term ramifications, and these players are on 7-year contracts. The club can't have that happen. Like, this is a fickle, complicated situation that it is not just easy to kind of be rude, chop off half the team, send them to the dev squad, and just stick with your core the rest of the season, Antonio Conte style. That's not this team right now.
No, it's not. It's not a team built to be competitive in the Premier League. It's not. It is a collection of some interesting individual players. And I think this kind of ties to the question that Ethan put to us, like, what do we do to get back on track? How do we generate stability? And he asked really about competent sporting directors. And I think, we entered a period of new ownership where there was not necessarily a sporting infrastructure in place or a hierarchy necessarily. There's been a lot of conversation about co-ownership of processes and procedures. But I think when I look back at just how Chelsea has spent money, and I look at who is contributing, and trying to define how many of the players that we brought in the last 2 seasons are like a hit or jury's still out, like middle of the ground, or they a miss. There's a lot more jury still out or misses than there are defined hits. And that is, for the amount that Chelsea has spent, the amount that has come out of Clear Lake & Co.'s dollars to fund Blue Co. to get this going, you look at 2022-23, and this is from Transfer Market, so it's ranked by spend, right? Enzo, West Fofana, Mudryk, Kukurea, Sterling, Benoit Badiashile, Kalidou Koulibaly, no longer here, Madueke, Malagusto, Chukwuemeka, Santos, who is on loan again, Aubameyang, no longer here, Fofana on loan, the inbound loan of Joao Felix, who is not here with us anymore, Gabriel Salina, and then the loan of Dennis Zakaria, who basically featured for a blip in a moment and then disappeared again. This season, Moises Caicedo, Lavia, two players who've had some injury, one who's had significant amount of injury time out, and Nkunku got injured early, and we're only getting a chance to really see him now. Cole Palmer, probably the one you could argue definite hit. Axel Disasi, Nicholas Jackson, I think could be a jury still out moment, but at least could be on a trend line to perform better than he did in the entirety of last season while getting used to a more difficult league. Sanchez, with the addition of Petrovic, feels like a miss. You have Ugochukwu, David Washington, Angelo, and Diego Moreira. Like, that is not it's not acquiring talent to go out and be competitive in the Premier League.
You skipped a lot of the ages too. Like, there are teenagers in here. Let's see. Sanchez is 25, Nick, and Nkunku's 25. Everyone that's still here, minus Raheem Sterling, was sub 25.
Yeah, I mean, I think the defined hits are kind of what you said. Cole Palmer for sure, and Nkunku, if he stays healthy, for sure. Petrovic, I think for the fee, definite hit so far. Giving up 8 goals in 2 games, not fantastic. Wouldn't put that all on him though. To be candid, I think Gusto is going to be a hit. Struggled with injury, but I think we've seen more good than bad out of him. Then you look up the list, and there aren't many more that you would consider automatic hits, and I think that is a problem. Is a lot of these guys have been bought on the prospect of them becoming, at the very least, like Premier League caliber players, and at the very most, like world class players. In the case of Enzo, Caicedo, Sterling, those types. So I think that is there has to be a reckoning on that front, right? That's a long ass list that we just put together that just says that the buying has been off, and the people who have done the buying have, from my knowledge, not faced any accountability for what's going on with the purchases, with the injuries, with the overall play and direction. And that would be a real serious conversation if I had poured $1 billion into these transfers. Personally, that's how I would feel about it.
I would say Santos for 12.5 million euros, from what we've seen in preseason at his age, is probably also good business, no matter how you splice it, because he's got the Brazilian premium that goes. But unfortunately, we have named way more players that the jury's still out on, or they are already gone. I will caveat Sanchez, Dan, and I understand where you're coming from. 30 million for a solid Premier League experienced backup keeper at a minimum, as like, you could do a lot worse there. I will say that.
Fair enough.
So we've brought up the sporting directors, right? Let me read you the press release from the club on February 2nd, 2023. So almost a year to the day just passed. Chelsea has confirmed its sporting department, with Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley taking up their role as co-sporting directors. They oversee the entire sporting team, comprising talent, scouting, recruitment, and data. Winstanley joined in November last year and oversaw Chelsea's January transfer strategy alongside the board. We all remember that January window last year. Stewart joins the club next week from AS Monaco, where he was technical director. They will work closely with Graham Potter and his coaching team to support the men's first team. The team includes technical director Christopher Vivell, gone, focusing on football globally, Joe Shields, Kyle McCauley, Jim Fraser, leading on talent management and recruitment, Matthew Hollum, leading on data analysis. And here's the big one. This team's focus will be on ensuring Chelsea is competitive and sustainable on the pitch, investing in the growth of the sporting department team to identify, nurture, and develop talent over the long term with a modern data-driven philosophy.
Now, I think you can make a case that some of like the advanced scouting and the purchase of players in different markets and all that sort of stuff is maybe functioning at a level, maybe not the one that Phil would like. But, again, like you bought Enzo Fernandez for 121 million euros. I think it was 105 million pounds. You bought Moises Caicedo for about the same. And you have yet to build the team around them. It almost is like you are taking them for granted and trying to build the team elsewhere. And I think that's a real failing, right? I mean, their age is what it is. They're 22 and 21 respectively, but you spent 200 million pounds on those two players, and you have not been able to, one, keep them healthy, and two, build a functioning midfield that can dominate the Premier League. That's what we were so excited about, right? You think about the recruitment of them was one thing. The price and the way that each one went down was silliness personified. It was crazy. I think we both, or I think all three of us, remember the many late night pods that we were like, will this happen? Won't this happen? Oh my God. And now you look at this and it's like, for Enzo a year later, for Caicedo 6 months in, we don't know where they're best suited to play. We don't know in which formation they're best suited to play. We've seen glimpses of them being really good together, and we've seen glimpses of a completely discombobulated and inefficient midfield. And those are the two bell cows that you have. Those are the, very Midwest term for those out there, those are the two prized assets that you picked up in this window outside of, some other high priced assets that have been able to stay healthy, and a 21-year-old Cole Palmer has saved your season so far.
Well, I think, Dan, at the end of the day, you can make advancements in pieces of it. And they talked about sustainability, but we are well into this project and yet to have seen clear strengths. The best thing that we saw this January transfer window is that we didn't blow a bunch of cash.
You have, you've gone through a couple of commercial directors as well. You've had to go through non-footballing operation personnel changes at the highest level due to
medical staff.
I would say it's football operations. So I'm talking about like non-football operations were, are pretty poor. Like you didn't have a front of shirt sponsor for a little bit of time as well. Like, at a certain point you laugh because you don't know what else to do in this type of scenario. And I feel like it feels like there's nothing that can be done that would be right other than, again, if we think that chaos and trophies is still a little bit of a part of Chelsea's DNA, wouldn't the craziest thing be Pochettino backing into a trophy win in a season where Tottenham doesn't get anything in the League Cup final and securing Chelsea a trip to some very new places for Chelsea to go play next season as a part of the Conference League. Like I think that's Sam McNally's question is just like, how do we have any optimism for this season moving forward? It would be if Pochettino stays, winning the League Cup would be the most positive thing that could happen for the remainder of the season. It gets you back into Europe, getting back into 7th, 8th position to qualify for Europe again. If we can claw our way back up there with a couple of results, like it's going to yo-yo. It's going to continue to yo-yo. There's going to be good results and bad results. But if you can just get a couple of things to bounce right on the day, maybe get some deflections that go our way for a change versus the other. Like that, I think is it. I think it requires a little bit of luck. And I think you could argue that Chelsea have not had great luck over the last 2 seasons. You create so much and it just doesn't come out on the end. And I don't know. I mean, you still get to root for Chelsea and not, other teams, I guess. That's another way to be optimistic.
Yeah, struggling to come up with that, which is understandable. Nick, I mean, what's your positive spin on this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think my expectations have dipped now, I think pretty significantly. So, considering where, I put the beginning of the season winning the League Cup as be a really nice point of pride. And I think a nice moment for these young players to coalesce around a really good result. Again, I think we are heavy underdogs in that matchup. And if we do pull it out, it would be seismic. It would be a huge result for us. I think the most positive thing would be that we start to lock up at the back, that the whoever the manager is, whether it's Poch or someone else, utilizes the talent that we have in the best way possible. We've seen many managers over the last just 2 or 3 years incapable of doing that, trying to imprint a style of play that just clearly won't work for a group of players. And I think that's really what we're seeing right now. And I'd really like to see the midfield gel for once. We've seen glimpses of it look really good, really dominant, really effective. And then you look at it today and it was just cut through like Swiss cheese. So I'm just kind of looking for small improvements at this point that could maybe set a foundation for a future, that isn't so bleak. But that's probably the best I got. Is it's not going to be the big goals that are hit this year. I think it's going to be smaller stuff. And again, we're in 11th place right now, guys. I mean, that's where our record and our play says that we should be 7th or 11th place, not 7th place like we could have been. So, yikes.
Look, silverware covers up a lot of cracks in the armor, right? And so, obviously, League Cup is the closest cup that we're there because we're in Villa Replay this Wednesday. We're back
can't wait for that.
Back to match every other week again. But yeah, the Chelsea Liverpool League Cup finals, February 25th is going to be here before we know it. And in between that, we have to play Crystal Palace, Man City, Tottenham. Well, Tottenham's postponed. So Crystal Palace and Man City. What a great way to warm up for a cup final. Like, at least we'll have a week ahead of that. But when your league results are hemorrhaging and you're putting all your eggs in this EFL Cup basket, like, that's going to create more problems for the match day squads and things. So it's no respite. I think if we can get past Villa, at least you now keep that hope alive. But the FA Cup gets harder and harder as well, and it goes deeper into the season. So if anything, you just try to go on a couple cup runs because you've punted on the season, right? That's the only kind of saving grace. But I think from a realistic perspective, it's what we've all come back to is be hard to beat. Stop conceding goals. We're creating enough chances. Like, we have to get the cohesive team gelled together. Find your best 11, play your best 11. And just kind of go from there. But a lot of that depends on the health of the players, which has not been there and been massive hurdle for this squad. But there's no cohesion. There's no chemistry on the pitch. What are we, like 2 to 3 changes per match? It feels like, at least. And it shows. It really shows, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a bit of a somber end here, but I think like that to me is
appropriate.
Yeah. I think there are sometimes there are people like, well, you guys are not fire and brimstone, so you clearly don't give a shit. And it's like, no, we clearly do give a shit. We're just looking for answers maybe in a little bit of a different way because we've done this for 10 years, and we know that there are very few easy way outs in this world. We've seen a few in our time. We've seen a few easy buttons get pushed, and those have been excellent along the way. But yeah, I think you got to start building with baby steps now. I mean, you got to accept where you are and try and block by block build a thing instead of hoping that 80 million new players and $1 billion and 18 new sporting director voices are going to fix everything in 6 months. It just simply won't happen.
I think the other thing is that it's not all of Chelsea, right? Because you'll hear Jesse and Abdullah, and I'm sure others talk about Chelsea women's team continuing to strive. I think a lot of that is still buoyed by the fact that Emma Hayes is here. It's going to be very interesting in the post Emma Hayes era. Can that continue? But that holdover has continued to be strong and continued to put out dividends. So I think that maybe doesn't get all the credit from Blueco, but they do have to invest in that, and we have gone out and made some pretty significant signings, and so I think they should get credit there. And the academy is doing well this season in general. So I think it's not all doom and gloom, but if you are only focusing through the lens of the men's team and some of the off-pitch structural issues of the club, there is a lot that needs to be worked out and addressed for first-time owners of a European stalwart in the game, and who is now not a part of really that upper echelon of conversation right now. And this summer, charting the path forward on how to get back to that in a reasonable amount of time to be competitive in the league again in a reasonable amount of time should be the only thing that is in the center of the conversation.
Okay, let's wrap there. I think we could kind of circle the wagons all night, but at the end of the day, the results are terrible. Players are failing, and the manager doesn't seem to be able to get cohesion. That is the sum of our situation right now. Unfortunately, that is not the situation around us. So obviously no Dan of the match for those of you unfamiliar. If it's a win, we're in. But hey, we're not crowning anybody after getting waxed 4-2 at home by Wolves. So if we look around the Premier League, Everton drew Tottenham 2-2. Good, right? We appreciate that. Brighton beating up Crystal Palace, also helpful as we have to take them on in the league next. Burnley 2, Fulham 2. Plenty of drama in that one. We'll circle back. Newcastle 4, Luton 4. Was not expecting this to be a draw. Sheffield 0, Villa 5. So Villa are flying high ahead of our cup meet. Bournemouth 1, Forest 1. Callum Hudson-Odoi scoring there. Chelsea 2, Wolves 4. Man United 3, West Ham 0. Arsenal 3, Liverpool 1 with the red card. And Brentford Man City play today as you're listening to it. Nick, a lot of goals this week, and that is one thing that you can take as an overall trend. Goals galore, but man, some of these results, I think Newcastle Luton probably steals the headlines on this one.
Yeah, if Luton are able to stay up, Edwards should be the unanimous coach of the year. Like, there is no manager of the year, whatever. There's no doubt in my mind. Like, what they are doing right now with their limited resources, and I mean limited in the most extreme case, is absolutely astounding. And I am really happy for them that there are teams out there overperforming their current squad and expectations. 2 former Chelsea players scoring in the Bournemouth Forest game. Solanke also scoring in that one. That was pretty interesting. Arsenal Liverpool was kind of a crapshoot of a game. It could have gone either way. I think Arsenal in the end deserved it, but Liverpool's still on top of the league. Where this ends is where it's ended the past 4 years, and that's Man City going to win this thing pretty easily going away, I think, by the end of the season. And that's because they have Kevin De Bruyne and no one else does. And it turns out that he's pretty fucking good, and he's going to make them run. And yeah, I think we are. If there's a combination of goals between Brentford and Man City, and that is 5, that will set the all-time Premier League goals in a weekend or in a match weekend record. So I think it needs to get to 45 to beat the previous record of 44, which I think was 2007-8. Been a while since we had some big old score lines like that, but yeah, that's where we are. I mean, the table is what it is right now. Liverpool in first, 51 points, plus 30 goal diff. Arsenal second, 49 points, plus 25 goal diff. City 2 games in hand on 46 points with a plus 27 goal diff. They win both of those. Surprise, surprise. They're in first and probably will remain there for the rest of the season. Villa on 46 plus 19. Tottenham 44 plus 14. 6th through 10th is some of the worst overall performance that we've seen in a long time. You have Man United 38 points now, West Ham 36, Brighton 35, Newcastle 33, Wolves 32, Chelsea 31 and 11th. And then it drops down to Bournemouth on 27th, Fulham on 26, Palace on 24. It's so gettable. It's not even funny, but we're just not going to get it. And that is the most frustrating thing is we're 7 points worse than United at this point in the season.
It's the opposite of when we backdoored into Europe by beating Wolves, actually. Mm-hmm. And it is the opposite thing that happened this year, which is not ideal and very sad.
First time they beat us at home in 37 years. So.
All right. Yeah, look, the yo-yo again, we were so close to trying to get 8 and 7 and set our sights there. But as you guys have outlined, we've done the opposite. I cannot believe how much we've regressed in 2 weeks. I absolutely can't. Right. The positive momentum of reaching a cup final, the positive results, unbeaten at home for, run of matches, poof, gone. All right. And so now what is hard for Poch is that he has to rally a dejected team and the fan base. By the way, some of the things that fans are doing with messaging players on social media is insane. It's abhorrent. Like,
stop it.
This is the toxicity that we're at. And I here might be a surprise to you. It's not helping. Okay.
No.
You might get a footballer to respond to you. Congratulations. Print it, put it on your wall, because that's the closest trophy you're going to get. All right. Know your role. We have to support. Do not bait people into that nonsense. It doesn't help. So again, we've all been here before. Maybe some of you haven't, but we've been here. You got to ride the down to get to the high side of it again. We just don't know if that's going to happen this season or next season. But either way, you got to back the team, back the squad, and hope the best for the results. But yeah, it's a tough time right now. We're in it with you. We would graciously open the doors to our Discord. Come hang out with us in there if you want to get off X, want to get off Twitter. We'll continue to just try to provide some level of analysis while everybody is telling you they know somebody who knows somebody that knows something. We'll just react to what's out there. So appreciate all of you. Hope you continue to stick strong because you don't have to wait long for another match. Wednesday it is Aston Villa in the FA Cup replay time. All to be had away at Villa. So more to come from us. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.